Hey Dave, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Victor. How are you?
I'm good. Well, I'm confined at home, but doing my bit for Spain. So I'm based in Malaga in Spain. So we've been working from home and confined now for like what, 2 weeks and 3 weeks, 3 weeks, and we have 3 more weeks to go at least. How about you?
Well, they're rookie numbers. I've been confined to home for the last 16 years and counting.
What are you
Uh,
talking
I've
about?
I've been working remotely for a very long time, so this is normal for me, but it's not normal for my family at all. So it's a very very strange situation, but we're doing our
Yeah.
best to adapt it as we can.
So and that's what brings us today here, right? So I mean, so I'm introduce ourselves. So I'm Victor Tuson Palau. I'm the VP of Engineering at Ebury. And before that, so I met Dave at a company called Canonical. That's the commercial sponsor of Ubuntu. We're not going to say how many years ago, but because I say this. But
A
we
few.
both were working remotely. And I think Dave was working remotely before we met. And I just started. And that was a period of like about 7 years that I worked remotely from home. And then after that, I've been setting up teams, advising people how to set up remote teams and doing quite a lot of remote hire and remote culture working, right? And Dave, also, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Dave Murphy. I'm an engineering manager in technology working on our API. I've been, like I say, working remotely for 16 plus years at a bunch of companies. Canonical, which was what 80% remote based, I think, something like that.
And
After that, I worked at Automatic, which is company behind WordPress. Huge distributed company, no offices anywhere, 100% remote. Remote at a small startups where I dealt with time zones. So, and yeah, before that, I was working remotely as well. So, a long time, a lot of experience, and been managing remote teams for the last 10 plus years.
so they started working when he was 10.
Yeah.
So why are we doing this video? Because I think there's a lot of really nice posts out there about the current situation and how to work remote for people that haven't done it before and so on. And that's great. And that's really good, valuable material out there. One of the things I've seen less often, what we wanted to do is what we do, Dave and I, which is manage people which normally are remote, but we understand there's a lot of people that this is their first time remote, but it's also their first time managing people are remote. And like this happens also at Ebury. Ebury, it's about over 1,000 people, and not just in technology. Obviously, there's like a lot of sales, financial operations, HR functions that are now remote. Although we have the tools to work remotely, and everybody's doing a good job at that. We for people, this is a new situation. How do you work with people in your team? How do you keep them motivated? How do you take care of them, right? So we've been doing this for a bit, so we thought it'd be good idea to share some tips. So this is not necessarily I was going to say the Bible, but like any sort of a specific rule book on this is the best way to do it. This is how we done it or how we learned to do it.
Yeah, and that's really important going into this. We've been doing this a long time. We're fortunate in the technology is about just over a quarter remote now. We've got some dedicated remote teams, but we're learning all the time. We're trying new things all the time, and we're having to, even the people who are dedicated remote, we are adapting and changing constantly to figure out what is best. So there is no rule book. There is no, this is the right way. It is, this is just our experience.
That's right. And going more into detail. So why is it important to talk about these things and to share experience? So it's not necessarily about how to do it better and how to get only the best out of your team and stuff like that, which is obviously important, but it's also because in my experience, there is a very real danger of burning out, right? Especially when you have people that did not necessarily choose to work remotely that end up having to work remotely for whatever reasons, right? So why? Well, why not compared to the office? Well, I think obviously people do get burned out in the office. That what it's kind of new, I guess, about working from home is that the reasons why you get burned out might be different, right? It's this constant fear of missing out, right? So while you are remote, there's constant chatter and interruptions. People are kind of pinging you, managers, stakeholders, team members. If you are a tech lead, someone that wants to ask you stuff. and it's constantly you asking you, and then you also have the fear that maybe someone is asking me something and I'm missing on where they're asking me, right? Maybe I'm missing a channel in Slack or Google Chat or Microsoft Teams or an email or a phone call or WhatsApp. So there's so many ways that you could get this information, and they're always on. They can become very overwhelming, right? Also, kind of intensity on the work cycles, right? Dave, you were saying it's not the same working from home, like an hour working from home and an hour working in the office.
Yeah, it's very different working in an office and working remotely. When people's immediate reaction when they start working remotely for the first time is to go, right, I'm working 9 till 5 and I'm going to do that. But when you're in an office, you're not working 8 solid hours. There is constant interruptions. There is stuff happening all around you all the time. Going for a drink of the kitchen, the water cooler can take you 10, 15 minutes. That's a big break. But when you're literally reaching over to to get a drink from the fridge, then you're not going to take as long.
Yeah, and that's true, and you're not going to take as long, and you're also going to find different people on the way, right? You're not going to find your core workers, but maybe you do find your personal life, right? I mean, normally, I mean, depends on what setup you have at home, but most people work remotely does have a standard setup with some separation, but that is only to certain levels. There is still kind of personal life that happens around it. And because it's in the same living space, even at least the same building, it's easier to blur the lines. These situations right now where we are we weren't planning to work remotely, it's even more the case because some people are working within areas that weren't designed to work, and they're not separated at all from the rest of the life, and they might be on their own, which is also a problem, but they may be with their families or their flatmates or whatever it is, and then sort of this personal life is going to blur even more into the work life, right? And it's always on, right? It's always, you're in the kitchen, you're in the living room, you're like, work is only 2 minutes away, right? So that kind of, sorry, go ahead, Dave.
It's just really easy to fall into that trap of just working all the time because it's there, and you need to take a break. Being able to work, you're able to do deeper work when you're working remotely because you can focus more, but the trap is that you can do too much and burn yourself out very quickly. So it's something that we have to be hyper aware of as remote managers.
Okay, so yes, it's hard. The current situation, your sharing space is always on, right? But okay, let's talk about now. What can we do to avoid this burnout, right? So first thing, it's probably we need to change the way that you in managing your teams if they were previously co-located, right? So how we manage remote teams, and that might be, it's also a valid way to manage co-located teams. So you might be doing this in Swan, which is kind of managed by outcomes, right? Not by hours. And the main thing is this picture of the challenge that you build for independence. So you build for people to be independent, right? So tell me a bit about it, Dave. What do you normally do for your team to work independently? What does that mean for you?
Yeah, so exactly that. It's based on the outcomes and the people being independent. They know what they need to do. They know how to do it. And we're looking to see their progress, which is why we do things like the daily rituals about stand-ups, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and other things. But people have to be empowered to get on with what they're doing. They have to know where to get the resources. They have to know how to find the answers. And it's really about being independent, being confident in what they're doing.
Sorry, go ahead. I was going to say also, you being confident that you know how to measure that they are being productive, right? Not necessarily about asking them or measuring how many hours they're working, but do you have performance measures, and are you confident on those, right?
Yeah. So the typical thing, particularly with developers, engineers, is how do you measure productivity? How do you make sure that somebody's actually doing what they're doing? Yes, you can measure the lines of code that they're doing, but that's a really bad measurement. It's about progress through tasks. It's seeing constant progression of the work that they're doing. Are they stuck on the same task for days at a time when you're doing the daily stand-ups? In the quality of the code, the output that's going through, you're looking at their work output rather than the amount of work they're timing on it. So is stuff of a good enough quality? Are they learning from their mistakes? Are they continuously improving about what they're doing? And so that's how you have to feel performance rather than have a very specific measurement. And that's why you need to stay in touch a lot more when you're remote. When you're in an office, you can feel it.
Yeah, that's right. Your gut tells you, right? And with remote,
Yes.
the gut can't get the same signals, right? Because
Yeah.
you more, even if you have video conference, it's not the same, right? So, and also remember, like, especially in this case, in these times, you may have monthly or weekly metrics that you use. Right now, if you want to see whether your team is doing well, rather than necessarily like making sure they're working, but maybe that they've been, you're worried about your business remaining being productive, you can't wait a month. But also, those metrics probably don't apply to daily, right? Not metrics that make sense on a monthly scale doesn't make sense or be useful on a daily basis. So think about that. What indicators do you need, and at what frequency do they make sense?
Yeah.
I think they've mentioned it, but you need to be more in touch. You need to make people more independent, but that's hard to do with new starters, right? So how do you onboard them?
Onboarding is really difficult. You have to put a lot more effort into making sure they have everything at their disposal. Again, we talk about it in other slides, but the knowledge flows very differently when you're co-located versus being remote. People absorb information; it transfers by osmosis. So there's a lot of tribal knowledge that happens in co-located teams, but you have to be really deliberate about sharing when you're onboarding somebody, so that they
And
know where to find their answers.
that's right. And how do we do that for independence and self-consuming? So at Tiburi, for example, we follow a very simple thing. We have a Jira project for onboarding. That you get your own Jira project and you do your own tasks. So the same way we do software development, you do onboarding, and that allows you to self-serve. However, there's still a need to ask people about things. People are going to have questions. We'll talk about it later, but it's kind of hard for a new starter to know who to ask. But also, when you're remote, you kind of sometimes feels like you are interfering with people. You don't know if it's okay to ask everyone. You don't know if that person is going to answer you. So it can be quite insecure. And for the other person, it's also a workload, right? So if the new person is asking you and you're not replying straight away, they may go and ask 2 or 3 or 4 more people, and then they kind of have like this sort of tsunami effect, right? So one of the things that we do, which is a tip that I give to people, is to assign a buddy. This is a way of saying this is not a mentor. This is someone in the team that you can say to the new person and to this person, it's okay to be disturbed. For this person, they can ask you, where do I find how to book holidays? How do I, maybe simple stuff, or like stuff that you forgot to put on your onboarding project, and so on. And of course, the last task of the onboarding project is to give feedback about the onboarding project, so we can make it better, right? So we talked about like it's hard to communicate and to interrupt people. So I mean, I know this is one of your favorite topics, together with one-to-one. So like, what do you think about instant messaging and remote communications, Dave?
Yeah, it is one of my favorite topics, and there is a very particular quote that I have from a previous manager, not Victor, I'm afraid, but from a previous manager, which was, over-communicate. It's very simple, over-communicate. If you think you are getting to the point where you are annoying people, you're probably getting the level right. Where if they actually are annoyed, they will tell you. But you have to over-communicate when you're working remotely, because people don't know what you're doing. They can't see you. They don't know if you're at your desk, if you're stuck, if you're working, you're not working. You have to tell people what's going on all the time. So really, over-communication is key to getting remote working right. But also making very clear how that communication happens. Is it being done through email chains? Is it being done through instant messaging chat, group chat, private chats? Whatever it is, your team has to know exactly where to go and how to communicate. So if they're doing their daily updates by video, you have a video meeting set up for it. If they're doing them by text, which some meetings do, they know where to post those. So that's what's happening. So really make it clear how the team is going to communicate so that everybody knows where to find the information.
Yeah, and remember that a lot of this conversation, and this is also true for the office, but because even more important remote, because it's harder to attend some of these communication events, right, when you're remote. So always, if you make a decision, something that needs to stick around, all of these things, video communications, chats, they are transigent, right? So the only thing that sticks is documentation. Yeah. So if you make a decision, document it.
Absolutely.
Right? Take notes of meetings. How do you do that? What tools you use? That depends on your organization, what you have available. Document decisions about code in Git, or use Google Docs for meeting notes, or whatever you feel comfortable, or your company is using. There's like hundreds of tools out there, but the important thing is the practice, right? And then the other thing that there's also kind of a bit hate of, I'd say, is the video conferencing without cameras, right? So we are using Zoom, and I think there are a lot of solutions out there. Right now we're using Zoom, but we also use Google Hangouts, and they're all quite good, and they all have their problems, right? But the biggest problem is the users using it, right? So this is one of our team meetings, and I think, as you can see here, is that everybody's got the camera on, right? And you can tell that Carmel, which is the UX ever, is at the beach. So it's like some funky new feature from Zoom where you can put any background. But more importantly, you can see that everybody has the same reaction. So Christina is talking here. You can see this, she's highlighted, and you can see like some people are attending. Dave is thinking about what he's left in the oven or something like that. Alejandro is not liking what he's hearing, right? Javier is thinking about it. Ima really agrees. She's very happy, right? So you can see that the different people engage. I get Juan Manuel is also thinking about what am I going to say next. So this is the sort of information you lose if you don't have a camera on, right? So it's super important. Switch on your camera.
You lose so much context through text. It's very hard to tell emotion, whether it's sarcastic, whether they're funny, whether they mean it seriously or not. You get a lot more context through voice, and you get even more context through video. So where possible, use it. Don't use it all the time. Don't have video open 24/7, but when you need to have a conversation, it will be a lot faster face to face, like this.
Yeah, exactly. And I think right now a lot of us are switching to or chit chat in the office, right? To some sort of instant messaging. So a lot of us use Slack in technology, but there's, like, as I mentioned, Microsoft Teams, Google Chat, more things like Telegram, WhatsApp, which are more kind of consumer oriented, but they can also be used for professional environment. So instant messaging, right? We love it and we hate it. So what do you think? What do you think are the best practices around instant messaging there?
So it's the middle one point of that slide, but this is asynchronous. Instant messaging is asynchronous, and people who are adapting to remote really struggle with that. Don't ask to ask the question. Don't say hi and leave the other person hanging. Ask the question and trust that they will get back to you. You don't know if they've got do not disturb turned on, if they're at their desk, whatever. So just ask the question and go back and check on it if you don't get a response in a certain amount of time. But apart from the asynchronous, be human. Don't just be blunt. Put emotions into your text. Put smiley faces.
Put emoticons.
Say hello and do things. Use GIFs. But there's somebody else on the other end of that message, and they need to know what you're talking about.
But you can be human, but what if the other person isn't being human? What can you do to deal with unhuman people, the trolls that are still working?
If you're not happy with the responses that you're getting, change the medium. If it's not working on email, take it to chat. If it's not working on chat, take it to a call or ideally video. And you will suddenly find the way you were interpreting it is not the way they were delivering it. And you can clear things up. So don't just keep banging away at the same conversation. Switch mediums to find out exactly what's going on and short circuit the process.
Also, I think that there's kind of a tendency to use these sort of tools for one-to-one conversations. So I'll ping you or write you a note or whatever. And that has different impacts, right? So one of the ways that you can deal with people being rude or aggressive or just short, it's keeping the communication in the open. So have a group chat and get them to talk there. Maybe it's someone in your team, maybe someone company-wide, someone external to your team that's asking you for stuff. They can do the group chat. So what advantages you have with that? Yes, they're gonna probably be more civil because there's more eyes watching and people don't want to look like they're rude even when they're feeling angry or whatever. But even when they're being happy, they will be even happier because they have more chances to actually get an answer, right? So it means that maybe you're not around, as Dave said, maybe you have the do not disturb sign because can be really disruptive, right? So it's okay to switch it off sometimes. But maybe somebody else in your team it's available and can answer the question. Maybe you do have a lot of these questions, and what you decide to do is to select someone in your team and do it like in a Rocha basis that it's answering the questions, right? Not to disturb everybody else. So yeah, start in the open, as Dave said, and look at all the things like private conversations or video calls or whatever it needs to be.
Yeah, people who are lacking confidence, particularly they've just switched to remote, they will tend to prefer one-on-one conversations, because imposter syndrome is a real thing across all industries, but particularly prevalent in the technology industry. And so people like to ask private questions so that they don't look silly. And so just encourage as many conversations as possible to be in the open by default. For one, it's better that, they're in open, they can include more people, but going back to what we said before about the fact that these conversations are ephemeral, they disappear very quickly. We need to make sure that anything that is concrete is documented and people know where to find it.
Yeah, and of course, make sure you don't shame or make fun of anyone for asking a question that you may think is simple, but obviously for that person, it's interesting. It's important. It might be more complicated than you think. You maybe just making an assumption, right? The last one is about IAM is that there is so many channels and so many communications, right? How can you keep up on top of all those conversations, right?
You can't. If you try and sip from the fire hose, you will drown. You've got to focus on the bits that you care about. Follow your team's channel, follow your one-to-one with your manager channel if you have one of those set up, but don't try and read every single topic everywhere's going. Stuff will always bubble to the surface, and if it involves you, you will find out about it. So don't try to consume everything.
That's right, and I think when it comes to that and stuff like that, so also remember to be social. So it's great to say, especially in a group chat, to say hello in the mornings and stuff like that. But while you're doing that, being social, it does not replace social interaction. And this is probably very poignant right now in these times, right, where this might be the only social interaction they're getting outside there. Confined mates, but also remote people in general, right? Because you want them to build relationships with your team. So we'll talk more about that later, but just remember that just because you chat with someone in instant messaging, that doesn't build up the social strokes, right, with that person. You need to work at that harder.
Yeah.
And
it's not just about work. It's about connections.
Not just about work. Right. So talking about that, how do you do some of that? And this is like favorite topic of Dave. So stand-up right ones and other ways of sharing information. So build rituals, build routines. Consistency is key.
Consistency is absolutely key. As I said before, information flows very differently when you're working remotely. So you have to have these regular rituals to make sure that communication is flowing. The daily stand-up, which is one of the tenets of Scrum, but should be practiced by all remote teams anyway. It's very simple. What did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And what is blocking you? It should take really no more than 15 minutes, no matter what the size of the team, unless you're dealing with hundreds of people. And it's just really quick, bang, bang, bang. Everybody know what's going on. Some teams prefer to do that so that it's purely social and their stand-up is actually written down. Other people will do the stand-up and then include social aspects after it. But
and if you have 100 people in your team, you probably not have the right size team, right? Maybe
absolutely not. That's not a meeting. That's a town hall. That's a presentation.
Exactly. That's a very good thing to do in terms of town halls, company wide. But remember, those things tend to be streaming one way, very limited two-way communication. Still very useful, but this is not what we're talking about here.
Now, I've been in town halls where we had nearly 1,000 people on the call asking questions, and it worked, but it had to be set up to flow. One person was speaking, people were managing the questions. You can't expect it to happen as a conversation like this.
Exactly, but there are more of a kind of Q&A session. They're different stuff. They're not a conversation, right?
No, not a conversation. One-on-ones, really important.
So should cancel them if you don't have anything to talk about work, right? No problem.
Absolutely not. They should happen every single week. Well, whatever the cadence is that you choose, I think it should be weekly, but it depends on you and your team. But they should always happen. They should never be cancelled. Rescheduled if you have to, but it should always happen unless absolutely impossible. And it should be led by the report, not by the manager, and it should not be about work. It should always be about what is happening around that, because when you're working remotely, information has to happen immediately, or can happen immediately. If you have feedback, good or bad, it should happen immediately. If somebody's waiting a week to find out if they're doing a good job, they're not going to know. If you're in an office, it would happen straight away. So when remote, it should happen straight away as well. So make the one-to-one, what's happening in their world? How are their family? What are their interests? work is
Yeah,
going to happen
it could be
naturally
like
because
a
it's the
mini
only
mini
connection you have.
retrospective, right? It
Yeah.
could be like a mini
Yeah.
retrospective of our work also with the person. So like, how do you think you're doing and stuff like that, but not necessarily about, you
Yeah.
know, item A,
It's
item.
not how are you doing on this task? It's
Yeah.
how's your week been? What have you enjoyed this week? What have you been struggling with?
That's right.
That
When
thing
you
we were
say
talking about
like,
2 weeks ago, how are you getting on with it? So, you know, it's just a case of having that conversation week to week.
right. And when you say led by the report, I mean, you know, it's the manager's responsibility to make sure it happens, but
Yeah.
the report has to fill the gaps, right, and fill
Yeah.
the air time, right? It
So
can't be you're the one talking all the time. If you're the
yeah, so
manager, you're doing it wrong.
the manager starts and says, "How are you?" And then you shut up, and if you know, you let them talk. And yes, you will get people who just don't want to talk, and that's fine as long as you know that they are okay. Then it's okay not to talk. But if
Yeah.
you are trying to find out information, you can just tease it out of them, and they will start talking eventually.
Yeah, and I would like to say that, I mean, as you say, weekly is ideal, but depends on the teams. I think under normal circumstances, of course, at this time, probably weekly, I would be strongly recommending that because, you know, things are going to change week to week massively in the world, right? And the world around you, and you want to check how people are doing with those changes, right? And then finally is this idea of information radiators, right? And also having rituals and routines around that. And this is about, again, borrow from Scrum. Scrum is really good actually for remote working, right? But it's the idea of not having to ask for information, but knowing where to go and get it, right? So information should be something you can self-serve, not something that you have to hunt for or ask someone to give you. And that should be updated asynchronously, so the consumer and the person updating it can do it at different times and any speed they want, right? So this is the best solution for micromanagers. You can click refresh on the Scrum board every second if you like it. It's fine. No one is going to care because the rituals of kind of moving the tasks are going to be at the same speed, right? But everybody's happy with that. So, you know, basically think about for your teams, what does this mean? It's not a Scrum board, maybe it's a performance KPI for the team. I mean, we're talking about tech, but this is not just for tech teams. Maybe they have teams doing support, doing sales, and you want to see their sales activity, and you have a dashboard where they can see if they're doing well that day. You know, whatever it is, whatever the dashboard is, just make sure that the individual can self-serve on this, right?
Yeah.
Great. So that kind of about how you work and routines and stuff like that. And then we were talking about it's not a 9 to 5, right? And I don't know if you remember this video, Dave.
I love this video. This is so good. This is so good. And absolutely captures everything we're saying. You just don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going on behind people all the time. They could be talking to you in one room and they could have a sick child in the next one. They could be having power outages, plumbing leaking, you don't know what. And we're all confined right now. And
this is an expert talking on the BBC on financial matters. I think it was like very serious stuff, and obviously working from home. And I don't know if this is the original take or they don't several ones now. But this is kind of the wife kind of realizing that the kids have coming into the room and like panicking and stuff like that. I think the message here is don't panic, don't worry about it. It's not your fault. It's not their fault. These things happen. To be flexible, right?
I can remember years ago when I first started remote working. Technology wasn't at the right stage yet, and we were doing conference calls by phone. And my daughter, very young daughter at the time, came into the room and said something else like, "No, I'm on the phone. Off you go." About 30 seconds later, I heard a click as she picked up the other phone in the house and started talking to see who I was talking to. It's like, yeah, kids are wonderful, but yeah, you just don't know what's going to happen. Connections break, things are happening. It's just, you've got to be flexible. You've got to be flexible. Working remotely, working from home is great. You have a lot of flexibility. You can deal with things. When we're not confined to our houses, we can deal with errands when we need to and not have to queue to post packages and stuff like that. But it doesn't, you still have to get your work done. So you have to be flexible.
Excellent. And I've, you know, like we've been doing this presentation to a few teams inside Ebury and so on. And one of the things that came up, then I added this slide specifically due to that. And I really love this this clip. So this is from the Windows 95 launch, right? That is kind of, well, you probably know who they are, Steve Ballmer and Bill Gates. That's an extremely awkwardly, right? What I'm trying to say, yeah, this is painful to watch, but it's also, this is going to be you. This is you now. Tough, right? What I mean by that is, like, I think when you are in an office, people can be social and interact on their own, right? And they don't need as much conduit. They kind of, oh, let's go for a drink after a coffee, whatever. And as a manager, maybe you just need to keep an eye that everything's going okay, but don't need to do much else. When you're remote, especially right now, where you have people isolating at home, this is you, right? Like, it's not up to them to sort it out. This becomes much more important that they socialize, and this is happening, and you need to build the events where social happens, right? So I'm gonna stop this. So it's freaking me out. I'm gonna stop share. I keep talking about it, but basically what we were saying is sort of how do you do that? So I mean, there are different ways you can do this. We do things like remote virtual drinks, right? So after work, yeah, because we're in the same time zone, we can do that. But you can also do things like online games, or just like do a team hangout where people can just come in and talk about what they're doing that day. I mean, whatever works for your team. I mean, I think you have to. I'm sure you have someone really social in your team that can help you, like with ideas and things that they do, playing some games online or whatever it is. What you do is probably less important than that brings people together. But also, you as a manager are responsible for making sure this is happening. This is not someone else's job to do, right? Or not part of your job description. It is, and sometimes, especially for people that are now having to manage remote teams, kind of maybe hard for them to accept that it is, and it can feel a bit awkward, and it can feel a bit like, oh, I'm a bit like Steve Ballmer, like, I love this company, but so what? As long as it works, do it, and you'll get better at it, and you'll get more comfortable with it.
Absolutely, it is really awkward at first, but you get into the swing of things. Having things like a list of standard questions to ask into your one-to-one. Yes, it's forced, false, whatever, but it just creates the habit. It will let you start speaking about things more, and it will progress. I can't remember where I got this quote from originally, but it sticks in my head, is that if you're having trouble talking to someone, if you find the conversation boring, it's your fault, because you haven't found the thing that they're passionate about. Everybody is passionate about things, and you just need to get them to open up and talk about it. And people like to talk about themselves, so you just need to tap into that. And one of the things of skills as a manager is to not talk about yourself and get them and be a really good active listener.
That's right. So, okay, so that was the end of the tips that we had. But of course, if you have any questions, you can leave us comments. We'll try to answer as many as we can. And just though this is hard, right? Like, we've been doing it for a fairly long time, and by no means will say that it's easy and that it's all under control, right? This is hard. This is hard for people who've been doing it for years. So of course it's going to be hard for you, right? Like Dave was talking about imposter syndrome. It's not just you. Everybody's struggling with this. We can help each other, but it's going to be hard. So hold on in there, and we'll see each other at the end of the tunnel, right?
Absolutely.
And as the Queen say, we will meet again.
We will meet again.
See
Thank you very much, Victor. Bye.
Have a good day.